All right, tonight we have multiple stories that have us asking the question we ask so often: is this White House for sale? Today, the Trump family's crypto business, World Liberty Financial, hosted a forum at Mar-a-Lago led by Don Jr. and Eric. Among the people attending, the CEOs of Goldman Sachs and Coinbase, the president of FIFA, Nicki Minaj, and a federal crypto regulator who we're going to talk about in just a moment. At the forum, Don Jr. and Eric both said accusations of conflicts of interest were nonsense. It's just getting old. But it leads us to another major headline that has to do with prediction markets, an industry that is absolutely exploding in value. The industry is regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. The man Trump appointed to run the CFTC, he's named Michael Selig, the regulator who was at today's forum. His agency just filed a legal brief to support Crypto.com in a legal battle with state regulators in Nevada. Last fall, Crypto.com announced a partnership with another business. Can you guess who? The Trump Media and Technology Group, the very company that runs, you guessed it, Trump Social. So a regulator appointed by Donald Trump is stepping in to support a business that is directly tied to Donald Trump's family business. Our nightcap is still here. Philip, we're reporting on potential conflicts of interest stories like this every single night of the week.
Sure.
Do they risk becoming white noise that people can't hear, or are they piling up to a level that people are saying, hold on, this is officially un-American? Because, you know, early days, people like to say, what about Nancy Pelosi trading stocks?
Sure.
What about Hunter Biden doing this? I mean, we're talking raisins and watermelons at this point.
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think that the quote from the Trump boys, where they said it's, you know, they're tired of it and it's getting old. Yeah, I think that they have their finger on something there, which is that, yes, we do have a lot of these stories. And it's hard for people to keep track of all these things.
Do you know why we have a lot of these stories?
I do know why, because there's a lot of these things that are happening, right? You know, I sort of look at the Trump administration now like one of those towers of champagne glasses, right? And you're pouring all the champagne in, and Trump's the first cup, and then his family's here. Then you have like the crypto business, and like this is how the administration is stacked. And there's just nothing at the bottom for real Americans. It's just all of these business interests that he has, and that's his priority and that's his focus. And we see that manifesting so often that people just do lose sight of it. And you know, I mean, this is the perpetual question with the media: how do we get people to pay attention to things they're not paying attention to? I don't know the answer to that, obviously, but it is very much the case that the reason that we're talking about this all the time is because it's happening all the time, and people do need to be more conscientious about it.
World Liberty Financial has brought in an enormous amount of money for the Trump family, but not for the people who actually invested in Trump's meme coin, in Melania's meme coin. Can you put into perspective for us how much the Trump family has benefited and how much the average crypto investor who bought in to Trump, how much they've lost?
Well,
to perspective, not hard numbers.
Crypto investors who got in behind the Trumps have lost their shirt. Also, anyone who invested
their shirt, their pants, their belt, their socks, their shoes.
Also, anyone who invested in Truth Social over the last 2 years, they've lost probably about 70% of their money or more. The Trumps, on the other hand, have made more money in the first year of Trump's presidency than Trump made in any year as a real estate developer.
In his lifetime?
Maybe not in his lifetime, but certainly it's right up there. And it's certainly, I mean, the only reason the Trumps have pulled in probably around $1 billion in the first year of his presidency is because of graft and corruption and trading on access to the presidency, his children, his spouse, and Trump himself. And they've turned the White House into a Walmart, and they know it, and they're happy with it because no one is trying to stop them. Todd Blanche was on TV, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he was asked about the UAE investing in the Trump's crypto operation. And then magically 3 weeks after Trump gets inaugurated, all the chip restrictions to the UAE get lifted. And Blanche said, all these questions you're asking, which is similar to the one that you and Phil just talked about the Trump boys saying there's too much of this questioning. Blanche said the same thing, and he said there's nothing untoward or unprecedented about what Donald Trump is doing, when in fact this is wildly unprecedented. No president before Donald Trump has grifted in the White House and monetized the Oval Office in the way that Donald Trump has. And untoward doesn't even begin to describe what's going on. It's corrupt and it's blemishing the Constitution and the White House.
A lot of young people are super into crypto. It's one of the things that helped Donald Trump win support for young men.
Yeah.
Now, so many of these people have lost their shirts while they are theoretically, I don't know if they're paying attention, watching the president get richer and richer. Is it landing?
Well, a couple of pieces of perspective. About half of young men under 30 have some experience in crypto. About half currently own it, another half have experienced it in the past. It wasn't for them about currency, it's about culture. Because why else would they be twice as likely than younger women, kind of within the same cohort to own that? But what younger men telling us, in every way I can ask the question, online, in person, over the telephone, in a focus group, is that they're under extreme amounts of stress. That 80+% don't feel like anyone has their back, okay? Any institution. And when young men look at the lack of regulation on AI, the lack of regulation on crypto, the lack of regulation around the crypto family business, and then what they're doing to the IRS, they're saying, who has my back?
But they wanted it. They liked the idea that he was like, he's an original G. He's our boy.
Of course.
We heard that over and over in the Manosphere podcast.
Because
he's not going to be like a Democrat nanny saying no.
That's completely fair, because when young people ask them to describe the Democratic Party, they say that's an HR department, okay? But that was one experience, okay? And now I think we saw that the number of people a year ago who felt that Trump would have a positive impact on their lives was over 50%. And now it's half of that number, okay? It was a rational choice they made, okay, because they felt like they had no other choice but to help their own kind of economic situation. And now they're looking at it again as a rational choice, and they're open and they're available to Democrats who choose to engage with them.
I don't know who came up with that. They're like an HR department, but man, that is a good one. Okay, on this CFTC story, I just want to explain it again. We have a Trump-appointed federal regulator fighting against state regulators to defend a Trump-linked company, Charles.
So really what this boils down to for everybody who's at home is, what are you calling this? Is it federally regulated derivatives, or is it gambling? When you're talking about predictive markets, when you're talking about all of these sort of linked businesses, that's the legal question that this turns on, Stephanie. And ultimately, I see this case going to the Supreme Court, because that is the only body that's going to be able to definitively determine what are we classifying this as and who gets jurisdiction over it. Is it the feds because we're calling it derivatives, or because they're going to have regulations over that and everybody's clear about that, or is it gambling? And that's where you've seen the pushback from many of the states who have said, we don't like how this is developing, and we're going to treat this the way we would gambling in our state. And for certain states, they're like, it's not welcome here. And so they've taken it to the courts, and this is going to have big implications going forward, all based off of how do we characterize what we're talking about.
Yeah, so these companies just hop between state to state to arb the regulations.
If it gets to the Supreme Court, there's already precedent, because the sports gambling boom occurred because this court said each state has a right to decide on itself, and that decision shouldn't be federalized. Right. So if this does get defined as gambling, then this court should say it goes back to the states, unless they're completely in Donald Trump's pocket.
Okay, but what happened to the GOP caring about states' rights, right? It feels like the federal government continues to fight against these states. First it was AI, now it's prediction markets. States' rights kind of used to be their jam.
I think that's fair to say, yeah. The 10th Amendment, we heard about it a lot. I mean, it's simple, is that the Republican Party is backed an autocrat, and the autocrat wants to have autocratic power over the country. And so he thinks that he should have the right to say what states are doing, and that Republicans who at one point in time were as worried about the 10th Amendment as they were about deficits are now saying, okay, we're not as worried about that anymore, because it's about power. And, I mean, I hate to be like oversimplified, but that's it. There's nothing complicated about it. In the same way that he's going after voting rights, he sees that there are, look, the story of Donald Trump in politics is he saw pockets of power and he decided he wanted them. First was the Republican Party, then was the White House, and now is everything else in the country. And so this is what happens. Yes, there are governors, and what does he say today? Well, the governor should just let me do what I want, essentially, when it comes to crime, et cetera. But that's his approach.